First on chat, Certified Sports Radio Learn.
Thank you. Take your seats. Welcome everybody this morning. We have a guest lecture from Tinker Air Force Base outside of Oklahoma City. Mr. Bob Valdez is the director of the 429th Supply Chain Management Squadron, and is going to talk to us about supply chain management in the Air Force and the whole role of the Air Force Global Logistics Support Center. So, Mr. Valdez, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Bob Valdez, and I'm from the 429th here at Tinker. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Global Logistics Support Center. I'll go through these slides fairly quickly, and I'd like to allow some time at the end for Q&A if you have any questions. So the next slide. Here's an overview. I'll talk about our vision and mission, how we're organized, where we're located, what does the GLSC do, some of our transformation initiatives through our strategic planning process, and then wrap it up with some of our accomplishments and recognition. Our vision is to be respected as the leader in supply chain planning and execution for the Department of Defense. Our mission is that we plan and execute the Air Force supply chain to enable our customer, the warfighter, to employ his weapon systems when and where they need it. The 448 Supply Chain Management Wing, which is headquartered here at Tinker, is comprised of about 3,000 employees, predominantly civilian with some military, and it's dispersed across 7 geographic locations, which I'll talk about here in a moment. You can see at the top our director is Mr. Gilbert Montoya of the Senior Executive Service, and his vice director is Colonel Tim Hinkey. We are organized into 4 supply chain management groups, and I'll break those down here on some follow-on charts. On the second line there, you will see that we have a senior advisor to the wing for engineering, financial management, management operations, and nuclear surety. Next slide. Again, I mentioned that we are dispersed across 7 geographic locations. I'm here at Tinker Air Force Base. That's where the wing is headquartered. The Air Force GLSC, the center, is headquartered up at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. Again, at Tinker, we are an air logistics center. We are responsible for the wholesale logistics and the supply chain planning and execution. There are 2 other air logistics centers, one at Hill Air Force Base in Utah and one at Robbins Air Force Base in Georgia. And then the GLSC also has personnel located at Kirtland, Langley, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This chart here will talk about the 4 supply chain planning and execution groups that I mentioned. The first one is out of Robbins Air Force Base in Georgia, the 638th. And you can see that the responsibilities for the 638th are the logistics support for aircraft structural items, in addition to communications and electronic components. Our second group is out at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, the 748th, and they are responsible for life cycle sustainment of landing gear, secondary power items, and ICBM missiles. Here at Tinker, we have the 848th group. Responsibility is aircraft accessories and instruments, aircraft structures, and also all of our propulsion items are managed here within the 848th. And then finally, we have a enterprise group, the 948th. By enterprise, I mean that it's kind of like a headquarters organization that's responsible for all the policy and procedures. They track all the metrics, and they manage the long-term strategic plan, which I'll brief here in a minute. So those are the 4 groups under the wing. Okay, so what does the GLSC do? Well, you can see this is a very complicated chart. I'll try to step you through it and briefly explain what our major functions are. I'll start at the top, item level lifecycle management. We have over 18,000 national stock numbers. I don't know if you're familiar with a national stock number, but it's an item of supply where we have total cradle to grave life cycle management responsibility. Everything from the budgeting, the procurement, the repair, and eventually the disposal of that item. So we have item managers across the 3 air logistics centers that I mentioned. Each item manager will have roughly from 100 to 300 national stock numbers within their responsibility, and that item manager is responsible for, again, total life cycle management of that item. Breaking down those functions a little bit further, if you go clockwise around the shield, the next function is develop demand and supply plans. This is where the item manager computes a monthly, a quarterly, and an annual repair and procurement requirement for each of those stock numbers that they are responsible for. Once they do that, they take the repair plan, once it's developed, and they work with the source of repair. Each item has a designated place where it's repaired. It could be a contractor like the Boeing Corporation, or it could be the organic depot right here at Tinker. So they take the repair plan for each of those items, and they negotiate with that repair facility how many they need, this month, for the quarter, for the year. The next function is strategic material recovery and reuse. This is one of our newer functions within the GLSC, and this was put in place in response to a shortage of some raw materials that are critically needed to make aircraft parts. For example, titanium, which is used to make a lot of our aircraft bearings, is in short supply, and there's only so many vendors that make bearings, so the strategic material is scarce. The Air Force is also competing with commercial airlines for some of these same materials to make their parts. So we put a program office in place to look at alternate forms of raw material, alternate vendors that we could go to, so we don't get in these critical situations and run short on that raw material. The next function is source approvals. We have a dedicated engineering staff within the GLSC that goes out and looks at different companies and does a source approval to approve that company to either make the part new or to repair some of our items. Many of our items are what we call sole source, where we only have one approved source that we can go to. And Department of Defense likes us to increase competition and approve additional sources. So this is a very important responsibility that the engineers have to approve additional sources for our items. The next function is diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages. As you know, the Air Force flies some very old weapon systems like the B-52, which is over 50 years old. A lot of the companies that made parts for the B-52 have gone out of business, or they don't make these parts anymore. So we have a program that looks at obsolescence management and how we can qualify additional vendors or look at alternate material so we don't get into these material shortage situations. Commercial derivative repair, the next item. This is kind of a new program. We've been working with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and we look at some of the companies that are FAA certified to repair airplane parts for commercial airlines, and we see how we could apply that and get them approved to do military items. This also increases competition that I mentioned earlier. The MSD GSD Sustaining Engineering. This is a budget of over $100 million that the GLSC manages, and this money is used to fund studies when we want to go out and look at different sources that we want to qualify, or if we want to reverse engineer a part to see how we could make it more reliable. Maybe the item is old and it's not lasting very long on the aircraft. Sustaining engineering basically funds some of those studies with industry on how we can improve support to the weapon system. The Nuclear Surety Action Office. This was established several years ago in response to some of the problems that Department of Defense had with nuclear items. The responsibility of this office is to make sure we have 100% accountability